Talking to the prolific arranger and orchestrator Charlie Rosen is a surprisingly similar experience to listening to his music. During our recent discussion about his new album, Backwards Compatible, featuring his huge and hugely popular 8-bit big band, Charlie simply couldn't help himself from making countless obscure references to a seemingly limitless array of musical influences.
Tchaikovsky, the overture from Candide, the beginning of an Kultum song for the intro, Henry Mancini, I love, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, in Don Sebesky's book, like we're saying, I respect about Gordon Goodwin is that, and Nelson Riddle, of course, is like the big dude for me. Esquivel, Led Zeppelin, Paul Whiteman Orchestra, Vince Giordano, obviously.
Just like his fast-paced conversation, his arrangements for the 8-bit big band pivot kaleidoscopically between diverse musical genres. It seems that no era, region, ensemble, or medium is outside of Charlie's purview. In his writing, references to classic rock might abut quotes from symphonies or allusions to Balkan brass music. Now, this might seem like a recipe for pastiche, but what really blows me away about Charlie Rosen's musical world is how his multitudinous influences seem to meld together into a cohesive and personal style. See, for the past decade, Charlie has been constantly busy as an arranger and orchestrator for Broadway, film, and television. Notably, he was recently the orchestrator and music supervisor of Be More Chill, the intensely loved Broadway musical by Joe Iconis. Meanwhile, he has tirelessly spearheaded multiple musical projects around New York City, including his Broadway big band and more recently his 8-bit big band. He is responsible for keeping a large swath of my musical peers working, and frankly, he doesn't need to hire anyone other than himself because he already plays 60 plus musical instruments. So yeah, Charlie Rosen is kind of insane. In this video, we're going to be taking a close look at Charlie's studio orchestra arrangement of the underground theme from Super Mario Land, featuring Leo P. from Too Many Zoos. And along the way, we're going to learn from Charlie about what it means to be a career arranger, how he approaches his craft, and why video game music is so central to his personal aesthetic. This is Score Study with me, Brian Krock. Part 1. The Complete Arranger. Listen, arranging has never been my strong suit. Both Charlie and I have stories about learning arranging lessons on the job the hard way. I did this Metropole Orchestra workshop many years ago where I got to work with Vince Mendoza.
Awesome.
We were working with Layla Hathaway.
Cool.
And for the arrangements I did, I got so excited. I fell in love with the songs and I sort of adopted them as my own songs. Right. And Vince pulled me aside and gently told me hey, I know that you love this music, but they're Layla's songs and I don't recognize them in your arrangements.
Definitely. And I have a similar story where I remember getting my ass handed to me by a composer / music supervisor on a show because I had done these arrangements and we were in the orchestra rehearsals. There were no vocalists and it was sort of this funky big band thing. And I just was I have to show off and do it. And I put so many background lines in and so many horn hits. And he was like, listen, this is great, but it sounds finished and the vocals aren't even here. There's no room for them. You're going to step all over them. And that's not the point is the vocals. You have to get there has to be room for the vocals or we can't use this. I'm like, oh God, okay. So since I had the opportunity to pick Charlie's brain, I really wanted to talk to him about what he thinks makes a great arranger and orchestrator. In Don Sebesky's book, he has a really great way of breaking down an arrangement at any given time is happening in a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary level of listening. The human ear evolved to be able to discern the importance level of different things in the environment. Whether it be there's background forest noise, but that tiger that's in the foreground, that's something I need to focus on. So we have an evolutionary way to discern importance. And that is our tool as an arranger to be in our primary layer, we have our foreground, our soloists, our singers, spoken word, melody, whatever it is. And in our secondary layer, we have whatever is sort of continuing the sense of harmony or adding motion behind the melody but not getting into it, pads, chords, piano, guitar, background lines, whatever it might be. And then we have our rhythm layer, which is providing our groove and our foundation, our root, the bass, the drums and all that. And what makes an interesting arrangement is that different instruments, quickly and simultaneously in real time switch their focus point. The bass solos, the horns have hits that go in and around the melody, so they quickly jump into one and they jump back down to two. But like having a control over making sure that whatever is in layer one is not being clouded by anything, I think is the sign of like a really professional commercial arranger.
This might be the first and most important task for an arranger. Keeping the foreground in mind, leaving plenty of space and flexibility for the soloist. In order to do that, you have to remember, like Vince Mendoza reminded me, to take a back seat and work in service of what the music needs. And interestingly, it makes me feel better to know that Don Sebesky had a similar early arranging fail when he first started working with Creed Taylor in 1961. According to Mr. Sebesky, Creed Taylor asked me to do an album with Wes Montgomery. I carefully wrote some arrangements, and Wes was so intimidated by the inflexibility of it all that he just froze and never managed to play relaxed. So we threw everything out and we started all over again. Clearly, there are some lessons you can only learn by trying and falling short. Talking about Sebesky inevitably led Charlie to geek out about specific books and arrangements that have influenced him.
I feel like my biggest influence certainly for the 8-bit big band, but in life in general, are these arrangers that generally tend to be sort of like with a lot of character and creative in orchestration, and sort of providing a lot of like fun things that really grab your attention. And so like I love Count Basie, Duke Ellington, like I love all these classic big bands, of course, but I think the sort of studio orchestra arrangers of this, 60s, 70s, 80s, like those are people that I'm really drawn to, like Henry Mancini. I love Henry Mancini is a great book that I really like a lot. Esquivel, I wish Esquivel had a book because that guy was one of the most inventive orchestrators that was doing it. I mean, just bringing in all these cool new instruments and sounds and using instruments we thought we knew in a different way, and having like two big bands, one pan to the left, one pan to the right, and switching off notes, and really just incredible orchestrating. And Nelson Riddle, of course, is like the big dude for me. Such interesting arranging ideas and orchestrating ideas. And what was great about his book is I feel like he got into more commercial, string and horn writing that wasn't necessarily jazz, which is really interesting. Yes. Henry Mancini's great book. Don Sebesky's got a great book. Nelson Riddle, a great book. Sammy Nestico, who just passed away, has a really great book on like just that classic swing sound.
Books are great, but they will only take you so far. It would behoove an aspiring arranger to acquire playing experience in ensembles both large and small.
And experiencing it through playing it was the thing that really made me be like, whoa. And being part of rehearsal processes and hearing the inner things going on inside.
On top of that, the more instruments you can get your hands on, the better. Obviously, you don't have to go as crazy as Charlie Rosen has, but holding a violin in your hands or buzzing into a brass mouthpiece will give you enough tactile experience to be able to keep the performers in mind so that you don't write anything that is unreasonable for their instruments.
The more that we can get inside, these various instruments and what makes them work, what's easy to play and what's idiomatic, what feels good, what feels bad, what people can do if they're professionals even though they don't like it is the big one.
Yeah.
Then it's like the more fun it'll be to play, and ultimately the better it'll sound because everybody will feel so good while they're playing it.
Ask your band director if you can just try out a bunch of different instruments or take one home or try out your friend's instruments. Okay, so you've read some books, you've played some instruments, and you've played in some ensembles. Are there any more prerequisites to becoming a great arranger? Well, open-mindedness is essential. Charlie explained to me the necessity of intimately knowing essentially as many musical styles and cultures as you possibly can.
Musical theater and subsequently video game music isn't so much a genre necessarily, even though people use it like that. They're both really delivery vehicles through which all genres of music can be repurposed to be dramatized for like whatever the context is, right? So when people say like, oh, I love Broadway, I love cast albums, it's like all these cast albums are all different genres. And so they're all tied together through the delivery vehicle of Broadway. And so what that means as an arranger, and the thing that I respect, like we're saying, I respect about Gordon Goodwin is that you have to have so many different genres at your fingertips because you're not sure what kind of show you're going to be called upon to orchestrate, right? And so you have, one show, and even within a show, it can be like, oh, this is a swing number, this is a funk number, this is a whatever classic Broadway, you know what I mean? This is like a mambo or a salsa or something Cuban, they'll really change gears, and you can tell the orchestrators that really like know the genres and know the articulations that are idiomatic of the style, the chord changes, the feels, and how to write them,
Your bullshit meter immediately goes off. Obviously, all of these areas of study, be it reading great arranging textbooks or practicing musical instruments or studying music from around the globe, these are all lifetime endeavors. So don't hold yourself back. At some point, you got to give yourself permission to just start writing. I myself would ask literally every ensemble that I was a part of as a young person if I could bring some music for us to play. Hopefully, if you're interested, you'll be able to find some outlet to write music for. Hearing music that you've imagined in your head, conjured in the real world, is magic, and you will walk around high as a kite for hours or even days after you have that experience. Part 2, Inside the Score. So Charlie described the new 8-bit big band record as an arranger's smorgasbord. And in that way, it really seems tailored specifically to arranging nerds. Like I said earlier, it is littered with references to a litany of musical legends, and each track features an exceedingly unique soloist. On first listen, I immediately knew that I wanted to ask Charlie to dive into the underground theme from the Game Boy game Super Mario Land, one of the very few video games that I've actually played, and therefore one of the few themes on the record that I actually recognized. And before I even heard it, I was excited about this track because it features an old friend from school, Leo P., the baritone saxophonist from Too Many Zoos. Apparently, the whole thing was Leo's idea. He pitched the song to Charlie. While listening, honestly, it was hard for me to stop laughing. The Led Zeppelin references feel tailored specifically for my ears, and Josh Plotner's beautiful ney playing, the ney is a Persian end-blown flute, sent chills down my woodwind-loving spine. Video game music is, in many ways, ripe for reinterpretation.
The thing that really draws me to like the early video game music stuff particularly is that these composers were working with extremely limited technology and length of their composing that they could do, amount of notes that could be played at the same time. So if you go back to like the true 8-bit era and you think about like the original Nintendo, you could only have, it was like you had 45 seconds max before you had the loop, and you could only have 3 monophonic synths and a noise channel at the same time, ever. And sometimes if there were sound effects, that took one of the channels, so your melody would go away. And so like through that, you have to distill harmony, melody, and a sense of groove and genre, and like within those parameters, the limited framework, they were able to do some really, really incredible things. And what's good about now being an arranger is, when you're working on an arrangement of any song, you sort of, if you're going to reimagine it, you look at it and you're like, what are the components that make up this song? Okay, well, it's melody, it's it's chord changes, and it's feel. And so then you're able to do whatever you want with it, change whatever you want. So these old video game scores from like the early days are just that. Like it's already distilled. And so you can take it and just do whatever you want.
Check out my transcription of the original recording by Hirokazu Tanaka, known affectionately as Chip Tanaka because he pioneered chiptune music while he was working for Nintendo in the 80s and 90s. Mr. Tanaka composed the classic soundtrack to Super Mario Land in 1989, near the beginning of the 16-bit era of video game consoles. So let's have a quick look at the composition that Charlie Rosen was tasked with arranging. It consists of 12 bars in an AAB form. The A section is built from a quasi-Middle Eastern scale that resembles the Phrygian scale, but with a raised 7th degree. The melody is built from 3 fragments, which I will label A, B, and B prime in lowercase that are presented in a call and response manner. The A chunk of the melody descends from the root stepwise to the fifth and is answered by the B chunk, which rises in opposition to the A chunk from the root to the minor third before landing on the root. The call is then repeated literally, answered this time by a slight variation on the response, which rises one step higher to the fourth scale degree before landing on the root with finality. These four measures are then repeated exactly. Next comes the B section, which features the one and only harmonic shift from the G Phrygian-ish world of the A section up to A flat major, whereas the bass of the A section orbits by half steps or whole steps around the pitch G. The bass of the B section opens up into strong perfect fifths for 2 measures before returning to the A section's G Phrygian riff. The melody of the B section also introduces a surprising new note. In measure 10, the 7th scale degree is lowered a half step to F natural, adding a fresh new spice into a distinctive dish. As you can see, within such strict limitations, small details make a grand impact. Now that we're familiar with Chip Tanaka's composition, let's reverse engineer Charlie's arrangement before zooming in and looking at its finer details. Charlie told me that he loves the charts of dynamic contours that are included in Rayburn Wright's classic book, Inside the Score. So I thought it would be fun to make my own dynamic contour chart of Charlie Rosen's arrangement of the underground theme. From my perspective, this arrangement is divided into 5 parts. There is an intro, followed by the first statements of the melody, a solo section, a cadenza, and then final statements of the melody in the form of an outro. Charlie has a knack for musical economy. With just a small handful of strong musical ideas, he created a really effective arrangement that lasts for 6 minutes. Now let's zoom in and look at each individual section. The intro's melody was actually originally intended to be played with quarter tones, but like any good arranger, Charlie had the flexibility to scrap that idea in the studio when it was proving too difficult for the performers to grasp. There follows a series of fermatas over which Leo's voice is introduced. This section, according to Charlie, was inspired by Kulthum, the Egyptian singer-songwriter who sold millions of records and drove audiences into a frenzy with her beautiful singing voice and interesting orchestral arrangements. Tanaka's original melody is then alluded to while the rhythm section plays the riff from Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. This allusion is far from arbitrary. The decision to include Kashmir was inspired directly from the source of the arrangement, Leo P. The following solo section is sparse. Obviously, Charlie wanted to leave room for Leo to do his thing and just kind of go crazy. And he didn't want to make the mistake of smothering him by overwriting, like Don Sebesky did to Wes Montgomery decades ago. After a short tag of the Kashmir theme played again, Charlie then has Leo conclude his solo with the oboe cadenza from Samson and Delilah, of all things. Then, a 12-bar development is used to ramp the energy back up. A dramatic accelerando is accompanied by a brand new rhythmic figure, and the arrangement concludes this way, in a heavy metal frenzy. Exactly the way Hirokazu Tanaka intended it. Anyways, I think it's a really great idea to start your arrangements with these kind of macro charts, whether it be a Rayburn Wright style dynamic contour chart, or what my first arranging teacher, Chip McNeil, called a word schematic. Write down in plain English exactly what you want to happen at each section. This serves multiple functions. It allows you to zoom out and take stock of the larger shapes that the listener will be experiencing. Additionally, it helps prevent indecision. You'll never reach the end of writing one section and wonder to yourself, I wonder what should come next. You'll already know because you've decided it previously. Part 3, the contemporary arranger. There are a lot of things about working as an arranger that you simply will not be taught in school. For one thing, being able to write an effective arrangement is really only scratching the surface of the requirements of the job. According to Charlie, the aspiring arranger would do well to accumulate as many technological skills as possible.
Us as arrangers, band leaders, what we can do to help that is have the technological skills to do as much of the work ahead of time, as possible, to make it so smooth, so seamless in the studio that, we can go in for a 3-hour session and knock out 5 songs, no problem, And so what that means is and this works for my band because it's a certain type of chart, but making tempo maps ahead of time, with all the tempo, even if there's little retards and tempo changes here and field changes, mapping them all out, making sure the time signatures and the measure numbers match up in Pro Tools as on your sheet music. Big one, save time. I do all of that. I make a MIDI demo, not an amazing MIDI demo, but a MIDI demo with horns, and I play the rhythm section in on the MIDI keyboard. Send that out. So if anyone wants to check it out, there's no question about what it sounds like. The copy work is really clean. Phrases are they look nice on every line. You can see everything. There's no chord changes that are obscured. It's all these little things that add up in the studio where you're like, oh, we just spent an hour, being with the engineer being like, wait, where is bar 73? It's not lined up, or things like that, where you just learn how to do as much of that stuff ahead of time as you can. And I do a lot of pre-recording for the sessions. So a lot of the times the guitars, all the aux percussion, anything that's synth, any synth pads, synth lines, that stuff's all pre-recorded before I get there. So there's all these stems. So I put these stems in so they can hear what they're going to hear. All this prep work goes into being able to go into the studio with great musicians who are incredible readers and prepared, and just be like, okay, we have 5 songs, go.
I may be biased, but I think that Charlie Rosen is doing an incredible thing with the 8-bit big band. First of all, unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you've noticed that there's a video game music renaissance happening today. Decades after the fact, people like me, in other words, music lovers who are not gamers, are being exposed for the first time to the fact that the staff composers for video game companies wrote incredibly unique and ingenious music that deserves to be celebrated in the same way that we celebrate the Great American Songbook or classic jazz composers, for example. Charlie, along with an ever-increasing group of peers, is paying homage to a truly unsung group of composers. And secondly, Charlie is generating an excitement for the craft of studio orchestra arrangement that really hasn't existed since its heyday.
What I've noticed about the 8-bit big band is, which has been so heartwarming, honestly, is similar to the way that Gordon Goodwin's band was for me. I have all these, high school and college age fans that are getting into big band music, and people that didn't normally listen to big band music commenting on YouTube, but being like, oh, I love this. And so it's an amazing delivery vehicle for all these classic arranging styles and orchestrating styles and sounds through this new canon of music that all of these younger people have this experiential association with. So that's their way in.
And Charlie has big plans for the future of his ensemble.
I guess my medium to long-term goals for it are a tour, which is what I was talking to somebody, a producer, about doing before the shutdown happened, sadly. And I just think a major city performing arts center tour would be a really great thing for this band, and would add so much weight to the body of video game music as an art form, to be doing this sort of legit performing arts center tour like big bands have done and orchestras have done, pops concerts, things like that, where it can be bring your grandma to the New York Pops because she loves the Pops and she loves, this ensemble.
Right.
It's video game music. And so we as young people also have ways in because we know the themes, and it's to hear the themes recontextualized is so exciting.
It's
So I think we're like in a golden age of video game music ensembles now.
Thank you so much to Charlie Rosen for inspiring me and for sharing his insights so generously. Thank you to all of you for watching my channel. It's honestly pretty shocking that my passion for all things music related has generated interest in almost 13,000 people. If you'd like to support me in this endeavor, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and maybe consider checking out my Patreon page. Basically, the way that works is every time I make one of these videos, I also upload exciting extras that are exclusive to my patrons, such as sheet music, unreleased audio, or full interviews. For example, my full hour-and-a-half long interview with Charlie Rosen, in which he shows some more of his scores, is available in full on Patreon. And it's fun. My patrons are the best. Thank you to all of them who have helped me out with encouragement just as much as with critiques, and I need both of those things to get better at this. So until next time, this is briankrock saying oeuvre and out. Whatever. All right.